President Biden making news on two fronts here this Friday afternoon on both the felony conviction, criminal conviction of Donald Trump in the last 24 hours on 34 felony counts. He made news there, and we're going to get to that in a moment, calling it his comments today, Donald Trump's comments that it was rigged, that this trial was rigged. He said other things as well today. President Biden saying it is reckless, talking about the 12 jurors who did their job, that Donald Trump has every right to appeal as anyone else would in that moving forward. He also made news on a global scale here involving the war, the Israeli war with Hamas, saying it's time for the war to end. This is a decisive moment, laying out three phases that have been presented to Hamas. First of all, the major first phase is this 6-week ceasefire during which hostages, many of them would be released, including the American hostages that remain inside Gaza. Then there would be a second phase, a third phase, where all of the hostages would be released, Palestinian prisoners, and many of them would be released as well. He went on to describe how the U.S. would play a significant role in then helping to rebuild Gaza, rebuild schools and homes for the people, the Palestinian civilians who have suffered so much during this war as well. Let's bring in Mary Bruce. First off, the Israel-Hamas war, Mary, why today, why now? We know Israel presented this somewhat new proposal in recent days. It's clear that the White House, the President Biden, has decided that this is the moment to put significant pressure on Hamas, saying that the world has called for a ceasefire, so now step up to the table and accept it.
Truly fascinating and pretty remarkable, David, considering the fact that these negotiations have been going on for weeks. But this is the first time that we have ever heard the president or the administration come out and detail what is on the table. The president just busted these negotiations wide open in an effort to up the pressure on Hamas. Of course, it also comes as the president himself has been under increasing pressure to do more to bring an end to this war. What you heard the president just lay out in very detailed, specific terms was a plan for a temporary ceasefire that he made clear would apply to all of Gaza. That includes presumably Rafah, which we know has been a sticking point, for the release of hostages in phases, beginning, as you mentioned, with women, elderly, wounded. Also, some of the deceased would be released. Aid would be allowed to rush in. Then critically, the president noting that that ceasefire after those 6 weeks would stay in place while they negotiate the second phase, which would include the release of the additional hostages. This is all an effort, this temporary ceasefire deal, of course, to lead to something more sustainable. Ultimately, he hopes, the end of this war. And the president is really trying to turn the tables on Hamas, saying, look, you said you wanted to end this. Now is a chance to show that you are serious. The president also nodding, of course, to the political pressure and mounting anger and frustration that we have seen play out in this country. The president saying, you know, he understands it. He shares their frustration that what everyone is seeing, what the world is witnessing in Gaza is deeply painful. And the president seemed to urge everyone to also help up the pressure on Hamas to accept this deal. David, the president, as he said, noted that it is time for this war to end and the day after to begin. It is also notable, of course, that this comes as Israel has suggested that this war could go well into next year. This president wants to end this or have a pathway to end this by Election Day, certainly.
Mary, stick with us here. I'll be back to you in just a second on the other part of news that he made here. But let's get to Britt Clennett in Israel for a reality check on all of this. Britt, any indication from Hamas leadership that they would entertain the deal that's been on the table here for a couple of days?
Yeah, Biden's remarks don't necessarily reflect the pessimism on the ground, David. There is no indication that Hamas will accept a deal. Hamas has said it wants Israel to end its offensive in Gaza before any deal is struck. And Hamas leader today is saying that it won't accept any deal without a full ceasefire and Israeli forces withdrawing from Gaza. So they've been very clear. They said that's in light of the aggression, siege and starvation and genocide of our people. Now, Israel has said they would be a little bit more flexible with the number of live hostages released, but Hamas replied that it won't be releasing anyone under live fire. Now, what we're seeing again and again is both sides very much blaming each other for a lack of progress, and you could sense Biden's frustration in his tone there. And I spoke to an Israeli government official, David, just a few minutes earlier, who said that the military pressure, the success that they're seeing in Gaza, both in the north and in the south, is the main factor that works in ramping up these negotiations. So he didn't sound particularly optimistic that a deal would be struck any day soon. But certainly for the hostage families, it's an agonizing wait, David.
No question about that. Britt Clennett, we appreciate reporting, and as Britt so well spelled out here, you've got one side, Hamas, saying no ceasefire unless the military halts, the Israeli military. Of course, they're deep inside Rafah, as we're on the air right now, with their military operation. On the other hand, Israel says they won't entertain stopping in Rafah until Hamas agrees to the ceasefire. So you can see where this continues to be stalled. Let's get back to Mary Bruce. Mary, on the other story that the president did address, we were not sure if he would. This is the felony conviction of Donald Trump in the last 24 hours. 34 felony counts, unanimous. This jury of 12 in New York, and President Biden, it wasn't even just a passing reference. This is how he began his speech today.
Yeah, and notable, of course, the tone that he took in this. Of course, initially praising the legal system, noting that these were jurors just like any other Americans, that this is how the American legal system works. That, of course, is in response to all of Donald Trump's efforts to argue that this was all somehow, a political hit job against him, that the American legal system is somehow rigged. And the president then saying that it is reckless, dangerous, and irresponsible to say that this is rigged just because you don't like the outcome. What is also notable is that the president, didn't get into the political of this, right? He didn't take any political jabs at Trump over this. In fact, at the end there, when he was asked some follow-up questions, the president, as you noted, sort of stopped, looked like he wanted to play and engage, but he didn't. And that is very intentional. The president here is trying to stay above the fray and also, show that he is doing the job. It is interesting that he decided to respond in this way, coming out as he is giving these remarks about the Middle East, as Trump is out there, undermining the American legal system, airing his grievances about this trial, and now, putting retribution really at the center of his campaign. The president is coming out trying to show that he is being president, that he is trying to negotiate peace in the Middle East. That is a contrast that this campaign, that this White House very much wants to lean into and highlight, David.
All right, Mary Bruce on both fronts today. Mary, thank you. I'll see you for World News tonight. In the meantime, let's bring in Rachel Scott here with me at the desk. Just a few seconds left here, Rachel. You heard Mary allude to this. Donald Trump speaking to the cameras right after the verdict yesterday. We carried that. And then today, addressing the cameras yet again. You heard Mary talk about this approach, at least so far, from the Biden campaign to show what they're trying to do is a stark difference between both sides. Donald Trump today continued to call the trial rigged, but went even further with some of the things he said about this country. And there's been reaction already.
Yeah, not a forward-looking speech less than 5 months out from Election Day. He called the judge a devil, said that we were living in a fascist state. This is a former president who blasted the legal system while also campaigning on law and order. What is clear, as Mary just noted here, his legal troubles, even this conviction, are going to be cemented as the cornerstone of his campaign as he continues to campaign as the first former president, presumptive nominee, to be convicted of a crime, David.
Right. Rachel Scott, the split screen here of the two campaigns with several months to go before this election. And as you well know, a very tight race.